and welcome to the Mosaic International South Asian Film Festival, MISAFF, presented by the Canadian Community Arts Initiative, CCAI. I am delighted to have great company today. This panel is co-presented with the Liaison of Independent Filmmakers, LIFT, and with me is Nariman Ansari. Welcome, Nariman.
Hi, Arshad. Nice to be here.
Tell us a little bit about LIFT.
Well, the way that I got introduced to LIFT was just as a newcomer. It's basically an artist-run agency which has been helping and supporting filmmakers and just in terms of education, resources, and networking, just to get to learn from each other and connect with others for a long time. And and I'm happy to represent them here today. And we'll be co-presenting this talk on South Asian cinema.
Yeah, we're really delighted to be bringing you a talk on the plight of South Asian cinema with a case study on Pakistan. And now it is our great pleasure to introduce our guests to you.
Well, I'd love to introduce, I'm really excited that Mehreen Jabbar is here with us today. She's a Pakistani-American director who has been working in the Pakistani television and film industry for more than 20 years. I have been inspired by her work for a long time, and just seeing a female filmmaker just changing and breaking the norms of storytelling in Pakistan, bringing her own style of storytelling and her own sort of stories was very inspiring for me. She has shown her work, her films at Tribeca. She's shown her work internationally in many festivals as well.
But she also showed her film Lala Begum at MISAFF, and we invited her, and we had a wonderful, wonderful time. And she has a huge roster of television and film, and she's worked with international actors and casts from all over the world. Welcome, Mehreen.
Thank you. I was mute, so thank you. Yes.
Next up, we have Saqib Malik. Yeah, Saqib Malik has been in the business for I don't know how many years, for many, many, many years, and he's an award-winning filmmaker. And his film Baji won the jury prize at MISAFF last year. It's absolutely a delightful film. And he has been making music videos and working in advertising in Pakistan. And he has a huge body of knowledge regarding Pakistani cinema, because he also worked as a entertainment writer, I believe, right, Nariman? So welcome, Saqib.
Yes, thank you for the very generous introduction, Arshad. And great to be part of this panel with such esteemed fellow colleagues. Thank you.
We don't have to pretend to be so formal. We're all friends and love each other very much. So now it is my great pleasure to welcome another incredible, incredible filmmaker whose film this year is going to be the closing night film at MISAFF. We're delighted to welcome filmmaker Sarmad Khusat. Hello, Sarmad. Sarmad Khusat is a multiple award-winning filmmaker. His films Zindagi Tamasha, Circus of Life won an award at Busan Film Festival, and his film Manto traveled world over. He has also been a very, very well-known and famous drama director and actor, and he recently was seen in the hit television series on Z5 called Churails. So welcome, Sarmad.
Thank you. Really glad and honored to be here.
So our conversation today is going to be about a little bit about the history of Pakistani cinema and where we're coming from and what has led to where we are today.
Yes, so today, because we are speaking for an international audience, we're introducing Pakistani cinema to many people here watching this today. I was hoping that maybe, Saqib, you could speak a little bit about how the industry began, how it is different from the Indian cinema and the kind of challenges it faced at its inception?
Okay, so I think the question here is, I mean, how is Pakistani cinema or the origins of Pakistani cinema any different than Indian cinema or what we consider Indian? India is a huge country. Um, Actually, there isn't, because prior to partition, there were three big centers of film in the subcontinent. There was Calcutta, there was Bombay, and there was Lahore. And basically, these centers used to provide all the, software for cinemas across India. And there was a lot of travel and exchange of ideas and exchange of talent. Many filmmakers from Lahore would go to Bombay. A lot of filmmakers from Bombay would come here. So um, till the 40s, it was really one and the same cinema. And then when partition happened, you had a lot of very prominent filmmakers from Bombay shift to Lahore, and a lot of the film studios in Lahore, which were owned by Hindus who then migrated across to India, they were taken over by the Muslims who came in, filmmakers who came in from Bombay, and then things came continued from there. So I really would say one thing, that the paths to both Indian and Pakistani cinema, the trajectories have not been very different. There's so much more in common than there is different, and this is why this is a debate that's often brought up, is that why can't we make films like Iranian cinema or Turkish cinema, so French New Wave, or why do we always have to be like Bollywood? Well, we are like Bollywood in a lot of ways, or cinema from mainstream cinema from India. I'm not talking about independent cinema, which is a much smaller thing. I'm talking about mainstream cinema, because we basically have very many similarities of culture, the same origins, and that's the way it is. And let's remember that back in the 40s in Bombay, Muslim filmmakers were very prominent there. It was actually the Muslim filmmakers and the Parsis, which were the building blocks of modern day, at least Indian cinema, Bollywood. And a lot of those very prominent filmmakers came here, continued making films, in the same vein, and that's basically the kind of cinema we've made all these years. And over the years, of course, as different kinds of cinema started emerging in India, of course, aside from the regional language cinemas that had their own specific tone and their own specific style, we pretty much also had our own specific tone and style, whether the cinema was from Karachi, whether the cinema was from Bangladesh, from Dhaka, or whether it was Lahore. So first, let's say we had very similar background as India, because it's the same cinema. And then once Pakistan came into being, we had three centers, which was Dhaka. And the Dhaka school of filmmaking was very similar to the Calcutta and Bengal school of filmmaking. The themes, the style of shooting, the kind of realism, the kind of very soothing texture of their cinema. So there were similarities there. Karachi was more urbane and very modern, and Lahore was basically, theatrical, and it came from a tradition of Nautanki and theatre, which is basically the origins of subcontinental cinema. That's just a bit of history.
Well, that's so interesting. And how did that evolve, like in the 50s and then in the 60s? And also, the next question I'd also ask you is how television changed cinema in Pakistan.
Well, quickly, then I'll let the others speak. So 50s and 60s, Pakistani and cinema and Indian cinema were very similar. So it's basically the same people making films. There was now just a border, but the commerce continued. Indian films continued to be shown in Pakistan. Some Pakistani films of the era had good releases in India at the time, like Dupatta and Intizar and all, which were big hits. And then came the movement in the late 50s, and the official import of Indian films got banned in Pakistan, but they continued playing in cinemas till the mid 60s. So Pakistani cinema really found its own authentic voice, I would say, in the 60s. Um, once you had a whole new generation of filmmakers, such as Parvez Malik, S. Suleiman, directors like this, was the second generation filmmakers who started making films with specific Pakistani, themes or cultural values that were more specific to Pakistan, and then this pretty much continued till I think to the 2000s when Lollywood, as we know, kind of died, and there was a whole new revival of cinema. TV basically came into Pakistan like 65, 66, and basically what happened was that TV and cinema had a very clear divide. TV was set up as by a lot of, was considered a place, a bastion of intellectuals, was very literate. And right from the beginning, it was organized and run by people who had, a certain idea of, or an ideology of how the arts, or at least the official sanction of the arts, should be promoted. And cinema was always relegated to something of the masses. So TV and cinema were like arch enemies. TV would never appreciate cinema, and cinema would always look down on TV. And that idea still continues to today, where many people who go to see movies, especially the revival movies, say, "Yeah, ye to TV drama lagta hai." And so, that kind of
how interesting.
yeah, that
And
divide
how
is very much there.
And how did theater come into play here? Like, was there a Pakistani theater scene? Because I know a lot of the actors were theater actors, and apparently there was a vibrant theater scene as well.
I
Can you
think
address that?
I think Sarmad is the right person to address that, because Sarmad comes from a family that has three generations of actors, and his grandfather was one of the luminaries of theatre in Lahore, and then of course his father is one of the most successful actor directors on television, film, and theatre, and now Sarmad is of course doing vanguard theatre and film and TV. So over to the maestro.
I wish I had this kind of thorough knowledge of the history, and then also if I was half as articulate as Saqib is about, and he's so passionate about it. That's why it sounds so convincing too. So as per my little knowledge, I think theatre always has been very vibrant here, and in the Punjab region, particularly, as Saqib mentioned, the Nautanki and all of that was happening, like it was thriving. And as far as I can recall, like even in the 80s and all the way to the late 90s, there was not a single night when my dad did not perform on stage. Like he was always, like working for theatre. It was a very active scene, both like in the semi-corporate or the privately funded realm, and then the government funded or the government supported Alhambra or other places like that. So yeah, and I don't know. I mean, from the 80s and the 90s, I do remember that, not the leading people, but a lot of supporting cast, and particularly the comic relief pool was always from the theater veterans, because slapstick and some form of stand-up or like, farce or that was like the popular genre that people usually practiced. So yes, theater had a lot of influence. And I think when I look back at the old films from the 60s and the 50s, I think the acting style was very theatrical also, which is kind of on the lines of how the Indian soap operas are now, like just facing the camera and talking to the audience and that kind of the oratory. And I think that is how it was also written. And apparently radio had a lot of influence too on the writing style. It was always dialogue heavy. I think again, I can totally like blame it on my shoddy knowledge, but I think the realistic cinema, or like say as Saqib mentioned, that Calcutta style of storytelling was not practiced too much here. So it was the theater, it was the opulence, it was always like the spectacle, and hence I think we have, I don't know, like a great memory of, if not a lot of great movies, but great music, song and dance, and that was like a favorite with almost every storyteller. So yeah, I think it did borrow, but also like I think the TV thing, I completely agree with Sakib. I think it's so sad that I remember like my dad telling me things like that. How like these like stalwarts like say Ruhi Bano and Arifa Siddiqui and all these like fantastic actresses who were like powerhouses of acting talent on television, but they did not do that well on cinema. Like they perhaps had like a couple of films and whatnot, but I think Ali Ijaz Saab was the only sort of that way is like a crossover where I think he started with television and then he was like a super hit all rounder in the cinema too. So yeah, I think it was a lot of borrowing and stealing and blending.
It sounds like it was very adventurous, and the theater community and the film community and the television community, even though they might be this divide in how they look at each other and their outlooks, they still informed each other. And the person who has actually been traversing both cinema and television is Mehreen, right? So, Mehreen, can you tell us a little bit about your, you starting off? I think you started off in the 90s and then the 2000s, and how you went back and forth. I mean, we're skipping a part about where we had the advent of VCR, and I know that like wrecked cinema in many countries, Pakistan included. But how is that going from television to film for you?
Wow, I've learned so much from these two guys, even though they're really close friends of mine for multiple decades. But I've really got to know. Thank you. So my thing is, when I started in 1994, I my vision or my dream to be a filmmaker was really, really just that, because at that point I didn't feel there was any avenue for me to ever get into cinema. So it was all ke aage kya hoga, what's going to happen in the next 20 years? Maybe I'll do something. So when I started, there were only two channels. TV was my destiny. I moved from my parents' ad agency. I just could not bring myself to make ads. So I graduated very, I wanted to get into storytelling, and my only venue was television at that point, and that too state controlled PTV, and then eventually NTM came about. This was pre-cable revolution days. So that's how, I spent maybe a decade plus of my life thinking this is where I can also tell stories which may not ever get funding in for cinema. A lot of that's how I started, which was TV films, which in our part of that time they were called long plays, right? Long plays, or which were a huge part of our television, which has now finished. It's mostly serialized stuff like TV series. And that is, I think that part of that decade really, I think, helped me hone my skills on how to tell stories in 80 minutes, 90 minutes, or 100 minutes, because we were not caught with that crazy monster of ratings and serialized episodes where you endlessly just go on and on and on, right? So I think those were really important years for filmmakers like myself to get our craft going. And then graduating to cinema, which is 2008, it actually happened 2006. It really happened, I have to say, because my father, I had no qualms about making it into the industry. At that time, a film called Khuda Ke Liye had been released, which had kind of revived, I would say. I don't know, but there was one multiplex in Karachi, I think. But that had got renewed interest in a different kind of cinema. And Ramchand was mainly produced by a lot of goodwill. It was like the GoFundMe of that time, where we just went to family and friends and begged for money, because that was the only resource we felt is possible for this kind of film. Because we knew at the outset, I think we were very, very clear that a film like Ramchand would not rock the box office at all. So we were doing it out of love, out of misguided dreams. It'll go to the festival. It's a powerful story to tell. But And therefore, I think you needed community funding. So because no studio would have touched it because their money would have completely gone down the drain. So that's how I got into that. And it then, and as per our expectations, it did not do well at the box office. It was also sidelined by Sing is King, which came, I think, a week after. So that just basically trampled over poor Ramchand. That was that. So then, of course, I had to recover. I went back to my television. I took refuge, and and then television has grown, and it's become. I did the serials, and my attempt at commercial cinema, Dobara Phir Se, was 2015. It's another 5-6 years ago, and I think the audience. I mean, that was kind of a hybrid. It was my attempt to make commercial cinema, and to Saqib's point, I think it is true. At that stage, I feel. To sustain the box office, you need films that can get out the masses who want to pay 1,500 rupees per ticket or whatever. So you cannot, like I really admire Sarmat, and he's done it with such passion, and with his hard-earned money, he's made these two fantastic films, right? And I hope that that kind of cinema, which is a discussion we should talk about later, on how Sarmat's brand of cinema can actually do well at the box office as well. Because I failed, but I think there is much more potential now.
Well, it's very interesting that you mention how cinema, how, the funding part. So do any of you have any insights on how, in the early years of Pakistan, how films were funded and how the state was kind of involved, and also especially when it came to television? Mary, you talked a little bit about Pakistan television, for example, being a place for refuge. Those are the words you used, where you go and you get funding and you get funded to make your works. So how has how the funding models changed, and how have the box office dependency of filmmakers changed over the last 70 years? I know this is a very, very huge, these are huge questions I'm asking, but really we're trying to get to why we are where we are at today.
Okay, so yeah, I can say a couple of things. I mean, it's a very open-ended question, but initially when filmmaking started in Pakistan, it was the way it was done in India. You had production houses and you had little studios, and those studios produced the films, and that pretty much continued all the way. You had Avenue, you had Shabab, you had Shanu Studios, and then you had different other distribution companies / production houses that would regularly make films. And some in the 70s, the whole system became much more kind of shady, because there's a lot of new money, a lot of black money that started coming into films. And so, the kind of quality of films and the kind of films that were being produced also changed. Of course, your audience changed. There was prosperity, newfound prosperity, new cinema houses opened. So it was all kind of informal, from the period of the 70s till, I would say, the 2000s. You still had the production houses. And then, Pakistani cinema completely, kind of died around 2005, 2006. And around that time, we had a whole new breed of filmmakers coming in. Indian films were also opened up. So that certainly created a whole new stage for distribution, for cinemas opening up, because there's a revived interest in going to the cinema. So from a working class audience, cinema became a more suburban, richer, more affluent experience. So all these cultural changes were happening. And so for the last 10 years, financing for filmmaking has really been either it's an act of passion, as it was in the case of Mehreen and Sarmat. Manto was produced, of course, primarily as a serial, so I'm not going to talk about Manto, but I'm going to talk about more Zindagi Tamasha. And of course, with Baji as well, because I self-financed that film. And I think for all three of us, these were acts of passion, stories that we wanted to tell, or films that we wanted to make. But I think other than that, what's happened is that in Pakistan, at least, the big media houses got into film production, and they've been very, very, very successful. So a lot of the talent that was trained in advertising and TV went into film. And along with that, it looked for a while that filmmaking could be commercially viable. So everybody and anybody, like a couple of years ago, wanted to make a film because there was glamour and glory and whatever you may say. There's still nothing like having a film in a cinema because people go and pay for it, right? And unlike TV or even Netflix, so you pay a fee, but it's not like going to the cinema. So it seemed like we were on a good trajectory because cinemas were opening up. There was rapid expansion. Some movies did really, really well and covered, not only covered their money, but doubled and tripled their profits. But now, of course, post-COVID and post the banning of Indian films in Pakistan, things are in a very, very dour state. So I really don't know what's going to happen and where the money is going to come because it's a highly risky game, very, very risky, where all your revenue is still coming from theatrical and not from any other revenue source, unlike the world where it's all diversified. And given the current state, it's a big question mark. And I leave I think you two can elaborate more on that.
Well, you also have a new player in the field now, which is the OTT platforms, right? I mean, they're doing some really great work and they're kind of going global and giving you new opportunities and funding possibilities. And they have a lot of interest in Pakistan from what I see, places like Z and Netflix and so on. Does anybody want to address that?
Not really. I don't think. Sorry, before you continue.
Sorry. Yeah, I agree. I think we think there's a lot of interest, but the one OTT platform that came was Z5, and that too has been banned. So, and the reason is that I don't think there's enough digital penetration. It's frankly that people come if they can find more subscribers or subscriptions. Correct? That's why India has done so well, because it's a billion plus people, and even if they get 10 million, that's a lot. But in our part of the world, I don't think Netflix has more than 90,000, 100,000, I may be wrong, people who are subscribing. And it doesn't make sense for them to then invest in originals, or Amazon is even less. Hulu doesn't exist. So there is a lot that has to happen before OTT platforms actually take an interest. And for us to develop our own platforms, it's not that overnight it can happen. It takes years to figure out. It's expensive to run. You incur a lot of losses, or you don't even break even for many years. So it's unfortunate. I wish we did have that, because the world is turning digital. It has turned digital.
So
I would only like to add that and I would not want to go into too many details, but I just find that notion. I don't want to offend anyone, but that it is too naive that, oh, it's digital now and they're interested in our stories. No, it's another complicated, extremely convoluted path to take, and that is precisely where I think the divide between us and how India has infiltrated and has grown, it's really different. And Marine, as she said, the numbers are very different. I mean, it's such a steep difference in the numbers. And even say, for example, the content that we have on these, well-reputed international platforms, it's second-hand content, right? I mean, which has done its theatrical run or what, and it's most of it, for a fact, has been bought for throwaway prices. And the moment, as I reiterate again, I won't want to go into too many details. The moment you go for, like, say, like a digital premiere or a first-hand, selling of the content, no, they're not willing to even pay for that. They're not. And also the routes are very, very complicated. The routes are not direct. And the routes also, they need to understand that they come with all sorts of politics of the geography of the region alone, So those politics do factor into, And I mean, without being, say, too active about them, I mean, artists, I would presume, and I would like to believe, are extremely passive in such contexts too. None of us are polarized like that, but all of that comes into play. And the only thing I would like to add, that way Saqib said that all the TV media houses have become like stakeholders and they're putting their money in, but they have actually also come with a lot of myopia. They have come with a lot of cowardice to not experiment. And they have come with some expectation that they would crack a formula which would be foolproof. And hence, for me or Marine, I think the big question was that when an audience can conveniently just say that, oh, this looks like TV, or this is almost like we're watching something on television. I think it has a lot to do with who's producing it. It is TV people producing it. They need to take the blame too. The process is very different. Films are not authored like that. Films are not initiated like that. The storytelling technique of a film is very different. Sure, the commerce angle needs to be there. Somebody needs to fill those cinema houses too. But then I also feel that the revival or whatever, it is too much burden on these 15, 12 filmmakers, out of which maybe only 5 are willing to comply to that expectation of cracking a formula. And I declined a lot of offers for directing films, which were funded by television or media houses, because I think they were just imposing a genre on me without caring for where my strength lies. And that I feel is very myopic. And that, if I have to do, I would much rather go to my safe zone, which is television, where I think that, I would not feel so burdened by proving a point or making a, a statement with the story that I'm telling. Sorry, that was a rant and a half.
I think you spoke for all of us.
We don't need to take that as, I think basically there is an expectation of people that when they go out and see cinema, they have to see pomp and circumstance and escapist fare and be entertained in a very specific way. That's because of years of what people have expected cinema to be. I don't think there's a negative in that. Now I'll just say one thing. If you take films that have been a little offbeat in the last 10 years, I think they've all been successful with the quality ones. Whether you talk about Dobara Phir Se, whether you talk about Manto, whether you talk about Lal Kabutar, whether you talk about Cake, Baji was really a commercial film. I'm not going to put that in. That's a very different kind of cinema. But these films all did reasonably well. The problem was that they were expensive. So they didn't recover their returns, but there was an audience that came and saw them. Cake, had it been made for 1 crore less, would have made money. Manto was a smash because anyway it was made for TV, and then the film version did extremely well 5 years ago. And by today's terms, it would have been like 3 times as much because it made a lot of money. And same with Dobara Phir Se. Dobara Phir Se, an audience went to see it and really liked it. So I think the challenge that lies with us, and same with Lal Kabutar, is that if we want to tell a different kind of cinema, regardless of what people say, this from TV or whatever, there will always be people who say that. That should deter us. We should make the cinema that we think has integrity and reflects our own voices, but we need to do it cheaply. We have to crack that formula. How can we make that cinema cheap, that even if it does 2.5 crores at the box office, you're safe, and then have some revenue streams that covers them. And that's the biggest problem with OTT platforms, as Sarmat said, is that nobody is willing to pay you anything. Baji is on Amazon Prime in the US and UK. I'm not making any money from it, but it's just there because I got an opportunity to put it, and it was a great thing. But even all the other films that are there on Netflix from Pakistan, there's not exactly a lot of money to be made there. So what's important is that we find those revenue streams. And I'll say one last thing. I don't agree with this fact that it's the Pakistan subscription base that is keeping the big OTT platforms away. Yeah, at some point, at some level it is, but I think ultimately what we have going for ourselves is that we have a fantastic, very popular drama industry, that television drama industry. That software is seen around the world. That software is sold around the world. That software is seen wherever people see Bollywood or wherever people speak Hindi or wherever there is a subcontinental diaspora. And I think OTT platforms will realize that Pakistan is a place to invest in because we produce stuff that is, one, third the cost of it being produced anywhere else, but the quality is almost as good, if not better, than what is being produced anywhere else, and the reach is phenomenal. So I think it's only a matter of time till somebody figures that out, and I think Z5 already did. I personally don't think Z5 is interested in Pakistan. I think Z5 is interested in getting content that the larger subcontinental diaspora wants to see at a very good price and excellent quality. Sorry, that was a rant as well.
No, none of you are ranting actually. I think you are. Sorry, Mary. You are
Sorry, I
actually.
was saying it's my turn for a rant, but my rant will last 30 seconds. I was just saying that I think Sarma that pretty much cracked that formula of making a low budget, compelling film, which I haven't seen, but it looks fantastic. It's unfortunate it went through what it had to, but he's very good at doing the do dhai crore films made for, let's say, $200,000. So to Saqib's point, I think it's totally possible. We have more equipment there. We have more people who are working in the industry. It is possible to make it at low cost now. Maybe before it wasn't because there were fewer production companies, fewer cameras, etc., etc. And it's become cheaper and cheaper. You know, you don't have to shoot necessarily on Alexas anymore or Reds. So that way,
Yeah.
that is the future I also see for any kind of survival of Pakistani cinema, in going forward.
So, what we haven't discussed is how the politics has affected cinema and television. In the 1950s, there was McCarthyism in the United States, and they had these strict, there was a code that came out, strict code regarding what can be seen and what can't be seen. And, it seems as if Pakistan is going through its own crisis of censorship. I mean, if we take the case in point of Zindagi Tamasha, for example, and now the kind of it's become even more complex because it's not just the state institutions that are censoring, but there are other powers at play here. How is Pakistan dealing with that?
I think all eyes on you, Sarmad.
I know this is a bit of a.
As they say in Punjabi, mainu to maaf kar do.
We've already had enough death threats.
No, the other day, I think it was like an article or something. I don't know, Marine, you get this, if it's the latest one or what. But I think it hit me so hard, where the headline was that, like a quote by Marine Jabawi, she said that, censorship is not the only problem. And trust me, I mean, it really was like a weird moment of aha, that yes, I've really forgotten about the actual journey before that, the actual ride, which was so tumultuous, which was so uphill. And, so I'll be honest. So with me, there's Manto, where honestly, I did get away with a lot, very strangely. And I'm not saying it was like something that is just missed or, it was like a thing that just did not get under the radar. It was Manto. It came with that kind of controversy about it. Sure, it was mildly interpreted or there was like, reinterpretation of the whole thing. But we got away with a lot of things in that film. And I thought that liberty cinema had. Now, also in case of Zindagi Tamasha, technically speaking, the censor boards, for example, where I think they just needed to grow a better spine and just stand by their own certificates. So much so, the Senate took it up as a human rights issue. I had a screening in the Senate, right? So I'm just saying that the problem is with the whole, the muddy, fuzzy, cloudy things that are on the fringes or that kind of enshroud the whole thing, because I don't think that that ways cinema is not that suffocated. We do get away. I'm just saying that the rating system is perhaps not in place as ideally as it should be, but we do get away with a lot in cinemas. And I just feel that particularly Zindagi Tamasha was just a case of unfairness. Yeah. And somebody just piggybacked on me and just used it, and it just happened to be like an opportune time and a right opportunity. That ways, on paper, what I'm saying is that the film censor board is definitely different from PEMRA. There is stuff that you can talk about, and as I said, that objectively speaking, I want to admit that I got away with saying a lot more political stuff, harsh stuff, hard-hitting images, and Mantu had like graphic things going on, and it was cleared by the censors. And there are three censor boards here, and I was quite surprised that two of them gave it like a U rating, and I think Mantu did not. Qualify for a U rating. It needed like 16 plus at least. So I'm just saying that, but with Zindagi Tamasha, I know defense certificates I still have, they've not been revoked. The other day, only in the Senate screening, somebody just said, oh, where's the banning letter? And apparently there was no letter, there was no official letter saying the film has been banned. So I'm just saying, so it's just that unsurety around it, but on paper, I do feel that they give that allowance to cinema where you can get away with stuff, and just a misfortune. I think that that clarity is not there, and that's my problem with camera also. Like one day you realize that, oh, this needs to be banned. I just want to see that damn charter. I just want to see those 100 points of things that you cannot show or cannot say. Like I want to see that document. I want to see the censor code. I'm sure it's somewhere. Like for example, the Human Rights Committee thing that happened in the Senate. They basically took a stand against the film going to the Council of Islamic Ideology, because the technical reason was that how it is not their right to call a film for screening, because it's rooted through the president or the prime minister or the governors or the Senate, or perhaps like one other institution or something. So the information ministry could not have rightfully sent it to Islamic ideology, and that's what they took a stand against. So I'm just saying, illiterate Jahil me did not know. I just thought, okay, whatever is happening. But so I think it's also a lack of not knowing enough. Otherwise, I'm sure the cinema people have, I'm just saying, there's so much graphic stuff. There's a lot of sex. There's a lot of masala. There's a lot of vulgarity. There's a lot of fun that we get away with too, We do.
Yeah.
And we've always gotten away with it. And nobody has ever had a problem with it. Violence, blood, gore.
I'd like to actually, one of the challenges that Pakistani cinema has faced is that we have not been able to establish ourselves internationally and establish our own language and be recognized internationally the way that we should have been by now. It's been many years, and I think the role of festivals is very important in that. I'd like to have Naveen speak about the Kara Film Festival, because that was a really amazing initiative that did a lot for independent filmmakers and helped to open a lot of opportunities for Pakistani cinema in South Asia to be recognized, and the challenges that she faced as one of the organizers. Please, Naveen, do tell us a bit about that.
So Kara Film was started in 2000, and it was basically the brainchild of 6 to 10 of us. It was entirely a volunteer effort, and I think it was a cry for help, that because at that time, again, cinema was not really there, and we were trying to find ways on how to have venues where you can show films from local filmmakers, student filmmakers, and invite filmmakers primarily from India, but also from the region if they agreed, and to have a place where you can showcase international films. This was again pre-cable, this was pre-OTT, so this was one of the ways that you could expose our own audience to cinemas from films from outside. That, I think it went on for 6 years, and the interim I was involved for 3 years, and I moved to the US. I think more than, I don't know if it encouraged the industry, but it gave a platform for the poor filmmakers to show their films. I don't know if it actively encouraged our own Pakistan film industry, to be honest. But what it did was, in its sweet little small sphere, it got interactions going from a lot of filmmakers from India came, a lot of big names, a lot of films were shown. And there was finally, the true fraternities, the Indians, Pakistanis, we don't have a platform anywhere to interact in person. So that was a great opportunity at that time. regarding festivals and Pakistani films at festivals, I think right now Sarmad has, I was shown in Busan, I was shown in Tribeca many years ago. Those are one of the best ways to showcase your film. It is limited because festival audiences are not mass audiences; they're still restricted audiences. And but the more you have, and that's why Iranian cinema is primarily known because it does really well at festivals and it wins awards. But again, it's shown here in these art house cinemas in the US, and there's an audience for it. We need to have a sustained number of films go to these festivals to have a voice or to be noticed. And India, for all its has makes thousands and thousands of films, but just in the last few years have they started being noticed at film festivals. I don't think in any film. Lagan was one that was nominated for the Oscar many years ago, but even at Cannes or at Tribeca, there are very few Indian films that used to come. So I think we should cut ourselves some slack. We are still young, and I think it will happen. Um, but yeah, that is one of the ways. I think the other way is, of course, to for some OTT platform to actually take an original, not as a second-hand showcase our films. That's the other way Pakistanis can have their films out there. Because again, in this COVID state, it's been affected the world over. So I am kind of pessimistic, but I feel after the vaccine and everything, mid-September next 2021 might see a revival everywhere around the world, hopefully.
Well, this is very nice. It's a ray of hope for Pakistani cinema. What about the young storytellers and filmmakers? I mean, yes, the international film festivals are, for example, I can speak for our film festival, MISAFF. We actually got a lot of uh, films from Pakistan, short films, and the quality has exponentially increased. As a matter of fact, you'll be hearing some really wonderful, you'll be seeing some really wonderful young voices, female and male voices coming out of Pakistan. We also showcased great films at the COSAF Film Festival, which was a coalition of South Asian film festivals that we had here. So that's definitely an avenue for film festivals to get recognitions, get recognition, to get their films seen. What kind of solidarity building is happening within Pakistan with filmmakers? Like, is there any movement? Is there any conversation going on within Pakistan? And are people able to uplift each other?
There's a WhatsApp group.
That's wonderful. WhatsApp groups are awesome.
Yeah, the one that you ran away from as quickly as you could, Mimi.
I'm there.
And so did Sarmat. And so did Sarmat.
We are the voyeurs on it.
I think, Sarmat, you can probably articulate a little bit on that because you've been working with a lot of younger filmmakers, and of course, you produce science film. And this ties in nicely with your previous thought about festival presence. You know, mainstream feature films, except for, of course, Sarmad's film, which got shown and won an award in Busan, and Ramchand Pakistani was shown at Tribeca, right? Mimi?
Yes.
And
yes.
and Dukhtar was also shown at Tribeca. But recently, Saim Sadiq's film won the Best Short Film Award at the Venice Film Festival, and Hamza Bankish has been showing his films. Which at which festival was it?
Locarno.
Locarno, which is again a very respectable film festival. And then, of course, South Asian film festivals play a huge role, and I think they're very prestigious, and they're an excellent door that's opened up to filmmakers from Pakistan, because not only do they reach out to the international diaspora, not just Pakistanis, Indians, Bangladeshis, but also to the international, audiences, or say for MISAFF in Canada or in the Greater Toronto area. Everyone comes and sees as a part of them. So that is a great inspiration for filmmakers here right now, and I think that's one of the reasons why short films are having a tiny kind of surge in Pakistan, and even locally there are a lot of in Pakistan small film festivals that are supporting short filmmakers and all of that. The problem still comes, where do you get the funding from? There is no, I wish there was an organization where we could just fund 10 short films a year. I wish I could put together a coalition of filmmakers or people and just put together, a festival and finance 10 short films a year that can then go abroad. So I think slowly but surely we do have a presence. We have a much better presence than a lot of other countries do. And like Mimi said, yes, we really should cut ourselves some of the slack, because it's only now that we are, developing our own language. For the longest time, Pakistani cinema was a very, very poor cousin of Bollywood, as we saw. And it's only in the last few years that you've got young people going to study cinema, getting degrees in cinema, having an avid interest in world cinema, and we are developing our own cinematic voices, both because of things happening locally and international festivals like MISAFF and all of that.
Thank you, Saqib, for your kind words regarding film festivals. I will highlight that people like Sharmino Bechinoy have gone as far as winning an Oscar, two
Oh, we
Oscars,
forgot.
and they have films that have opened in many notable film festivals, and done theatrical documentary screenings
Of course.
in major countries around the world. So Pakistani cinema is getting known, and there's a lot of great pioneers who are females. Mafia Nathaniel's film Dukhtar actually world premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival.
Yeah.
And Science film also went to the Toronto International Film Festival. So, I mean, film festivals are a great place for, your country's cinema to shine. There's dedicated, several countries have dedicated, arts and entertainment and culture funding for film festivals and for filmmakers. And, for example, in Canada, every business has to give a certain amount of money towards the arts and culture. So perhaps Pakistan could use that kind of thing where commerce supports independent cultural initiatives, and that could be looked at.
But, when we're talking about that, one also needs to admit that, it's in a very nascent phase at the moment, I've been associated with like occasional like endeavors with teaching, and only for my own sake. Like, I just enjoy the idea of interacting with people, and sometimes just getting the time to interact with non-industry people. It's like, I just need that kind of other people who are not in the whole rut or the mainstream of it. So I enjoy teaching a lot, but it's been literally just over a decade that it has been accepted that it could be taught, that it is an academic discipline and people need training in things beginning from writing to all the technical, complicated, facets of it. So, and literally, that is a very bright light at the end of not a very long tunnel. I think young people are, not only in terms of their achievements, I think the brightness of just their minds, their ideas, and yes, in the last 4 or 5 years, I've worked with a lot of young people, fresh grads, and people who have just sort of, studied it on some level, even in local schools. And they're really bright, fertile minds. And that is where, I think there comes a responsibility that, how to help them hone their talent now. Because I know that they clearly know that we do not want to do television, or we do not want to do a certain kind of cinema, and they should be allowed that, even if it sounds like a luxury. Like, we went through that whole drill where we're like, no, one needs to perhaps spend a decade or more in TV and learn all of this. But these are people who actually very committedly want to just practice cinema and learn cinema. So I think I have a lot of faith in that. Like with, say, first time DOPs to editors, to writers, people in all sorts of, the creative departments and the technical departments. And it's a bit of a journey for both of us. And but it's been extremely pleasant and kind of, like a happy thing in the end that, I firmly believe. And with short films, I think, yes, it's honestly, it's a medium where I don't understand it too much. I don't know how to make a short film. I don't know how to write a short film, but I think that it's such a powerful medium. And my only kind of, a wish would be that, I wish it could just stay somewhere in the whole sort of distribution circuits where, one could just watch these things. A lot of thesis films, for example. Kids from NCA, people from Zabist, and people from ICRA, and and I mean, a lot of other places, small institutes in Pakistan also, they come, I mean, at least I think I find out of say 20 films, there would be 4 which would be phenomenal, with like that kind of original voice, which, like I sat there in that kind of, serious looking jury where I'm like, really, why are we supposed to judge it or mark it? Like, it's so spectacular. And so that ways, I think teaching and that whole thing about accepting that it's an academic discipline where people need to be trained, that needs to be accepted now. I mean, I think the new wave, if at all, I mean, it's such a cliche, the term itself, but if there has to be one, then it should be just about, I don't know, the new voices being allowed to thrive on their own, as opposed to now trying to pigeonhole them into that myopia.
Well, that's a very positive outlook. Any last words from any of you?
Do watch Zindagi Tamasha. This could perhaps be one of those rare opportunities when you can watch it.
No, it will play. I'm very confident it will.
Zindagi
Everywhere.
Tamasha is the most beautiful film out of Pakistan.
Can I please get a
Oh my
link,
God.
Sarmat, very soon? I want to watch it.
It's
Please.
an outstanding film, and we have a lot of interest. People are very excited about Zindagi Tamasha.
Yeah.
Thank you for those very hopeful and positive insights into Pakistani cinema, and the future of Pakistani cinema seems bright. So we're very happy about that. We do our part to spread the word and share your beautiful works. Thank you, Nariman Ansari, for helping us organize this panel. Thank you to the Liaison of Independent Filmmakers of Toronto, LIFT. And thank you to our incredible guests, Mehreen Jabbar, Sarmat Khusat, Saqib Malik. The Mosaic International South Asian Film Festival runs from the 4th to the 12th of December, entirely online. Please invite your friends to watch the incredible movies and share our news and watch our industry panels. And welcome to MISAFF. Have a wonderful day.